Okay, so our third thing we're going to do is we're going to read about the pyramids and we're going to write some masterpiece sentences. So let's start off with what do we know about the pyramids? Okay, so let's answer that. What do we know about the pyramids? Anything you know, really. Okay, and now we're going to read through the pyramids. This is in our book on page 96, but we can just read it right here on the screen. And I want you to be thinking about some masterpiece sentences we could write. So, what could we write a sentence about um, that we read? Okay, so the pyramids. We have three sections here. We have the basics, we have uses, and we have construction. So the basics, I'm thinking, is going to be about just an introduction to the pyramids. The uses might talk about how the pyramids were used, like what they were for. And then construction is going to be like how they're built, right? Like we know construction workers are people who build things. So we've got construction. We'll probably talk about how we built the pyramids. And I know you guys talked about how they made mummies. So maybe this will be similar, how they made pyramids. Okay, so we've got the basics. It says solve this puzzle. Its huge base is flat and has four corners and four sides. The sides slope up, but the top isn't flat. It has a sharp tip and was made long ago in Egypt, where about 90 of them remain. You figured it out? It's a pyramid, and it's amazing. And now we have uses. Uh, Pyramids were constructed for two basic uses. First, they were sacred sites where rites were performed. So it's important to know sacred sites, we're talking about things that are religious for certain people. So sacred, we're talking about sacred sites there, there's the religious sites. And then where rites are performed, rites are, you know, celebrations, certain ceremonies. So that's a word there. So there's sacred sites where rites were performed. Second, they were designed as final resting sites, the graves of kings. And third, we have construction. So it says, the pyramids were constructed long ago when there were no motors. There were probably no cranes, and workers may not have even had wheels. It seems like an impossible task. The stones the workers moved were huge, and they made millions of stone blocks. One base block was so big it weighed 70 tons. How did they do it? Their method involves steps. All right, so we're going to see some steps, the methods. Step one, this is what it is. Step two, this is what it is. This is what we're going to see here. So I'm thinking, so it says first, this is our first step. First, they dug the stone and then it was put on a raft. The raft drifted down the Nile. At the site, the stone was taken off and workers chipped and shaped it. And over here, I'm noticing we have a picture of workers chipping and shaping. So I'm going to look down here and see it says workers used copper chisels and stone hammers to construct the pyramids. So you know what tools they were using, copper chisels and stone hammers. Okay. They sculpted and carved a channel into the stone. Next, they drove a wooden wedge into it. They drenched the wedge in water and it expanded. So they drenched it, covered it in water, and it expanded. They added more water, so the wedge expanded more. At last, the stone split, and they cut it. They used chisels and stone hammers to make it the desired shape. Up the ramps it went, and the pyramid rose. So did the ramps. Stones were dragged into place as blocks stacked upon block. Finally, the workers reached the top where they put on a capstone and it was finished. One more amazing pyramid. So let's think about that. What are the steps we have here? All right, so now we want to write our masterpiece sentences. And we want to have something to do with the pyramids, because that's what we're reading about. So we're going to look at our masterpiece sentence template. And we've got, remember, our subject and our predicate. And our predicate is just another way of saying our verb. So I'm just going to write that here so we remember that. Verb. So anything after the subject, it's the verb, and it includes the other parts of the sentence too. So we use this template because it helps us think of how we can include the most information into our sentence, because we want our masterpiece sentences to be longer. We want them to be detailed. We want them to have a lot of information in them. Okay? So our subject, who or what did it? So I'm going to look back here and think, what do I want to write this about? So I'm going to say maybe Egyptians. Okay? So let me change the color here. I'm just going to say Egyptians. All right. So I've got Egyptians is who did it. So which one? Which Egyptians did it? So here I could be thinking about, am I talking about Egyptians who live in Egypt today? Am I talking about ancient Egyptians? What Egyptians am I talking about? So I have to look here and look for some information here. So let's see. It says they were constructed long ago when there were no motors. And it said, let's see, they're workers. So maybe I could say the workers did it. Okay. So we could say Egyptian workers. And see, my subject is becoming more detailed now. So now what am I thinking? What kind of worker? What kind of worker am I talking about? That's our next step. What kind of, so how can I make this more detailed? Talking about what kind? Maybe I could talk about how many from there. Okay? And then from there, I want to think about what did they do? What did the Egyptian workers do? And then who did they do it to? So, what did they do it to? So if I'm going to say they built, what did they build? When did they do it? Where did they do it? And then I want to think about, here's some additional questions. How did they do it? How much did they do it? How often did they do it? So we're trying to include as much information as we can in here so that we can then turn this into one of our masterpiece sentences. So I want you to take your template and I want you to fill it out based on our reading. And then I want you to write one masterpiece sentence, okay? You might have to rewrite it when you get more information, but I want you to just have one for this activity, okay? So let's get to work on that.